Hey everyone, today we have a very special guest for you. And as you know, I am a former visa officer and US immigration attorney. My name is Mandy Feuerbacher, and I have been running this law practice for a while now, helping international citizens with their US visa problems. This is when you get denied a visa, when your case ends up in administrative processing. But I have a very exciting announcement to make, which is that I have someone joining the firm, someone who has actually my exact same experience. And his name is Travis Bierbacher. Surprise, surprise, he actually has the same last name. I'll let you guys guess why that is. Um, and
A lot of
today,
people have that last name, Mandy. What are you talking about?
yeah, like Bierbacher, really? I don't know. I don't think I've ever run into another Bierbacher unless they were related to me.
Yeah, there's
And
got to be like
so
10 of us.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very tough name to pronounce, but at least you and I know how to pronounce it correctly. Um, but anyways, so I wanted to, introduce Travis because obviously this is a big change in the firm. Now you're going to have even more prior visa experience. You're going to have someone who's a licensed immigration attorney talking to you about some of your consular processing issues. And this is so exciting. I'm super excited to be working with him because, Travis and I have worked at as consular officers at embassies and consulates around the world. And it was such fascinating work. And because we have that experience, is why we're able to help you today, help you get out of these jams, help you when you have problems like, visa revocations, your visa was denied, perhaps you got a DUI in the US and you don't know what's going to happen at your next visa interview. All of those things we have a lot of experience with, and we're just really excited to help you together. And so, Travis, why don't you talk a little bit about, why you want to do this? Why do you, want to help international citizens with their visa issues?
Well, it's a good question, Mandy. I think there's several reasons actually, but you think about where we both come from. First of all, with a name like Feuerbacher, or obviously that's not the real German way to pronounce it, but a German name like Feuerbacher. My ancestors came from Germany and Switzerland, and Mandy, you were born in China. And so we're proof here that if we didn't have a real immigration policy, if we didn't welcome people from all over the world, not only would neither of us be here, but our country wouldn't be what it is today. And so I think anything that we can do to facilitate qualified people to come here, whether it's permanently or for a vacation or for a business meeting, I want to be part of that. But I think beyond that, in case anybody watching this wasn't aware, Mandy and I actually met each other when we worked at a civil litigation law firm in Los Angeles, California. And at that time, we talked all the time about what we wanted to do with our lives. And one day I told Mandy that there was this thing called the Foreign Service. We could actually go and work for the State Department, and we could live abroad, and we could learn languages and do all these cool things. And Mandy's response was, "Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. How do we do it? How do we sign up?" So eventually we both went through the process of applying and going through interviews and taking tests and getting security clearances and everything else that's required. And quickly we found ourselves in Beijing, China, which, it was an exciting thing for Mandy being a Chinese American. It was exciting for me. I got a chance to learn Mandarin and live abroad. But why were we so excited about that? Of course, it was, this opportunity to live abroad and learn languages. But the deeper reason that I really always wanted to be a diplomat, a foreign service officer, was because by interacting with people face to face, we can break down those misunderstandings. We can build a deeper sense of understanding, a deeper sense of trust, and maybe just maybe we can live in a safer, more welcoming society. We worked with a couple of military professionals when we were in Beijing, and I'll always remember what one of them used to tell me. He used to say, "Travis, if you do your job, there is absolutely no need for me. And what he was really saying is that if we have true diplomacy, if we're really meeting with people and interacting with people internationally, there will be no more conflicts. There will be no more wars. And maybe that's wishful thinking, but that is really the goal of immigration. It's the goal of traveling, the goal of studying abroad, of moving abroad, of working abroad. And so I'm excited. I'm really excited to be part of this initiative and to help all of you get where you want to go.
I love what you said about that, Travis, especially the part about international students. I think one of my favorite visa categories to help international citizens with are those students who want to come to the US to study abroad.
Yeah.
And, the US has some of the best universities in the world. And it's frustrating to me that so many international students are unable to actually get here because, they weren't prepared for their visa interview and they did not realize that 2 to 3 minutes in front of a window talking to a US government official was going to decide the fate of their next 4 years and their future career and what they get to do with their lives. And so I just think that working with students is one of my favorite parts of this practice. And I'm really excited, for you to join me in that endeavor. So we clearly are very much on the same page about this. And so, how long did you tell everybody, how long did you serve as a US diplomat and consular officer?
It was close to 7 years. So we spent our time in Beijing. We spent some time in Mexico. Did another kind of short tour abroad back in China. I've even worked in Guatemala back when I was in university. So all told, it was right under 7 years.
That's awesome. And how many visas would you say you made decisions on? Visa applications, I guess.
It was over 80,000 visa applications that I handled, which is it's a staggering number to think about. But I think, Mandy, I think you did even more than that during your career, didn't you?
I think I did a little bit more, but it was because I worked in Hong Kong and had a lot of
Mm,
visa experience there. But I think you and I can probably agree upon, this very unique culture that consular officers share. I think it's very difficult for someone who has never been in our position, never worked as a visa officer behind the window to truly understand what that process looks like and how these US government officials actually make these decisions. And, it's not really something that most people talk a lot about, but I think it's so important for people to really understand, how these decisions are made so that they're making decisions correctly. And so, you know, I know my experience from Beijing, but why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what it was like working as a visa officer in one of the busiest posts in the world in Beijing, China?
Yeah, I mean, I think what a lot of people may not know is that every US diplomat, what we call a foreign service officer, every single one has to spend at least 1 to 2 years as a visa officer in their first two assignments. And so that means that no matter what your general focus might be or what kind of your career trajectory might look like, you have to interview visa applicants. And so that means that there are a lot of folks that may not have joined the State Department with this type of job in mind. And you show up to work every day and you're faced with a waiting room full of people. And you know that you have to get through these applications. You have to speak with all of these visa applicants before your job is done that day. And so I think for many, it's a daunting prospect to know that this isn't necessarily what you've dreamed of doing as a diplomat, and you know that you have a lot of work in front of you before you can go home that afternoon. And so, when you think about the mindset of many visa officers, coupled with the fact that because the workload is so demanding, you may have maybe 2 minutes, maybe a little bit longer on average to interview every visa applicant. Each one of these applications, each one of these interviews is so crucial. You have almost no time to establish your circumstances and explain to the visa officer what you're planning to do. And because, like you said, Mandy, very few people really understand how the process works from the other side of the window. What are the considerations that go through a visa officer's mind? What information can the visa officer actually see when the applicant is standing at the window? What concerns might the officer have about this applicant's situation, that's where we can come in and we can help you put your best foot forward. We can walk you through the process, and then we can strategically work with you to prepare a plan. And I think this is exciting because we really are helping people prepare for one of the most important, crucial 2 or 3 minutes of their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often tell clients, this visa interview, in addition to all of these other things, it's also kind of an exercise in trust and credibility. And you really want to make sure that you're prepared because, you don't want to look like a deer in headlights at your visa interview, right? That, suggests something. And so it's super important to take this process seriously. It's not a long process. Well, it's a long time to wait for a visa appointment these days, but the actual interview itself is not very long. And so you want to make sure that that you're prepared and you're doing everything you can to maximize your chances of getting approved. And that's what we're here for. And we're super excited to be here to help you through this process. I can't even imagine. I feel like before there was us, people had to do this on their own, or even worse, so many visa applicants I interviewed in Beijing and Mexico and Hong Kong. I remember, if they got denied a visa, I would say, why did you say that? Or, I was a little confused about that answer. And they would be like, well, a visa agent told me to say that. And they told me if I just said this, if I just said I was married instead of single, or if I just said that I had no kids instead of 3 kids, that I would get my visa approved. And so not only are people not getting help from people who really know what they're talking about, like us, they're actually actively getting bad information from people who are just trying to make money off of them or don't really understand the process. And so I think in this day and age, it's so important to get the right experts and to get the right people helping you in your case, because with that help, that could mean the difference between a visa approval and a visa denial. And if you're watching our channel, clearly this is something that you're taking very seriously. And I think that, that's great because it's a very serious thing.
Yeah, and
And
Mandy,
so,
one of the worst
yeah,
pieces of advice that I've heard applicants receive is, well, there's two. One is you should say this, even if it's not true, because visa officers really are good at spotting lies and spotting kind of half truths. And if there's a doubt, you're very likely to be refused. But the second and potentially even more dangerous piece of information a lot of these applicants are given is that some service provider, some consultant can guarantee a positive outcome. And, let's be very clear here. Nobody but the visa officer has the power to adjudicate a visa, to make a decision. And so if somebody ever approaches you and says, we will guarantee that you're going to be approved, they are flat out lying, and you should be a little bit concerned about that. And so, Mandy, what we always tell people is we will definitely not guarantee an outcome, but what we will guarantee is that we can provide you that expert insight from our personal experience on the other side of the visa window to help you prepare. And that hopefully is enough to get a positive outcome, but nothing is guaranteed.
absolutely. What we do is maximize your chances of getting approved because we understand this unique culture of consular officers and this short timeline that they have, and they're always focused on efficiency. And we can, use our insights to maximize your chances. But Travis is absolutely right. There's no way that anybody can guarantee that your visa will be approved because it's based on so many different factors. And I know the government never likes to say this, but there's a part of it that is a little bit of a subjective process. It depends on that visa officer and who you get. I mean, Travis and I, having worked with so many different consular officers, I remember, those officers that were always inclined to deny everybody. And then also those officers that were more inclined to approve everybody. And so, part of this process might be who you get at the window. And unfortunately, there's no way to predict that. And so you kind of just have to do everything you can to put your best foot forward.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Travis, what were some things that really surprised you when you became a visa officer?
One story I'll tell is when we got to Mexico, I took over. My job was actually called the Fraud Prevention Unit chief or the fraud prevention manager. I can't remember specifically right now. But essentially, I ran an office of fraud investigators, and we were tasked with finding and investigating potential fraud in visa applications and passport applications. And so we uncovered multiple large organized rings of fraudulent applications on both sides, visas and passports. And the thing that surprised me was how good some of the fake documentation can actually be. We saw people using fake documents to prove that they owned property, to prove that they graduated from a certain school. We even saw people using fake birth certificates that were signed by real doctors in the United States, even though the individual had been born abroad, maybe in Mexico or somewhere else. And so what this really did reiterate for me is visa officers cannot rely on documents. And you may have seen in a previous application, you bring a whole stack of documents. You may have spent weeks or months preparing, printouts and copies and certified versions of certificates. And the visa officer says, no, I don't want to see any of that. And you may have been very surprised. But the reason behind that is because you can quite frankly create a document that says anything and that can purport to prove anything. But the reason that we have these in-person interviews, this pretty friction-filled requirement that you have to go into an embassy or a consulate and get your fingerprints taken and speak with a human visa officer in person. The reason we do all that is because we want to look at you. We want to talk to you. And so if we just relied on documents, which can very easily be forged, the whole process is almost meaningless. And so that's another piece of advice that Mandy and I can work with you on is there may be a couple of key documents that might help your case, but the real foundation of this application is how you explain your circumstance, how you present yourself, how you actually communicate and speak with the visa officer. And so that's something that's always stuck with me is, a document can say anything. It's not that useful.
So true. So true. And I remember when I did a whole YouTube video about why visa officers don't look at documents. And I think it might be the most popular video on our channel because so many people just don't understand why the stack of documents that they prepared for months, isn't even being looked at. But you're absolutely right. I just remember all the black markets that were available where people could just buy whatever documents they needed for their visa interview. And that is why consular officers do not like to look at documents. And of course, there's, some nuances with this issue. If you're applying for an employment-based visa, like an H-1B or an L-1, you definitely should bring in your employment documents and things like that. But for the most part, if you're going for your tourist or your business visa interview or a student visa interview, most of the time they don't really like to look at documents. And so, Travis, I love that you talked about being an FPM, a fraud prevention manager. What was it like working as a fraud prevention manager in Mexico? Were there specific things that you looked for, and sort of what role did you play in the visa office at that time?
We looked for a whole number of things. And generally, the way a fraud prevention unit, which is what this office is called, the way it works is a visa officer will encounter a visa applicant. They'll go into an interview and something doesn't seem quite right. But the visa officer is thinking, okay, if this actually checks out, if these one or two issues that I'm not really sure about, if they prove to be true, I will be issuing the visa, but I want to make sure they're true. That visa officer will then refer that case to the fraud prevention unit, and we have many different tools at our disposal. We may look at social media posts. We may look at government records. We may even look at school records. We may call that applicant in for an in-person interview where we can spend more than just a couple of minutes to really understand the applicant's situation. We may call in others, people that the applicant works for. We may even go and look at a place in person. One of the interesting nuances of life on the Mexico-US border is that many people do obtain a visa to go work, but it's right on the other side of the border. It's not as if they're traveling, thousands of miles or thousands of kilometers from their home. And so we did have the unique opportunity to actually go to some of these offices. And we found a few places that were not actually offices. We went in we went in one place that was an empty room with a couple of wires on the floor. And this was apparently a working company that had thousands of employees doing all these things. And so it's, you really see all types of fraud. And it was very rewarding to get into some of this and start understanding the different vectors that we need to be aware of. But at the end of the day, it all goes back to the importance of telling the truth, being honest, being upfront, and also being able to confidently and succinctly explain your situation. Because if you start fumbling for a story, or you say something, in the first 10 seconds, and then you say it again later and it doesn't really match up, visa officers are really quick to jump on those inconsistencies or those hesitations. And that's where you can find trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can only imagine how hard this is for international citizens, especially if English isn't even your first language. You just have a few minutes time to explain yourself properly. And sometimes you're maybe speaking a different language, and every word matters, right? Every second matters, every expression matters. So it's really important that you're prepared and that you're not caught off guard or not really understanding, the question. And so those are all things that we can help you with, especially because this is, it's not just about this one interview. All all applications are sort of connected. So whether or not you're applying for a tourist visa now, but in the future you may want to study in the US, if you get one visa denial, that could be trouble. That could be a red flag for your entire case. And so I always tell clients, you really want to keep your record simple and clean, and you don't really want to muddy it up with a lot of visa denials, because at some point, if you get enough visa denials, it's hard to succeed even with expert help.
That's right. That's one of the first things a visa officer sees as you approach the window is your past applications. They'll see on their computer screen, have you been denied before? How many times have you been denied before? As well as other details. But that is one of the first things. And so I agree, Mandy. It's super important to keep that record clean and to prepare before your first interview instead of after you've been refused 2 or 3 times, because it does get incrementally more difficult to get a positive result after you've been denied each time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, now in our practice, we work a lot with clients who have very complicated visa situations. Perhaps they've had a criminal issue before and they're trying to get a waiver from a visa officer. And that's also something that Travis and I are very well versed in. Visa ineligibilities, which are also called visa bans, and waivers when you're eligible for them. And so, Travis, I feel like you and I could probably talk all day long about all of these different visa nuances. But, I also want everybody to know a little bit more about you personally. What are some things that you like to do in your free
Wow, that's a good question.
time?
Well, first, I love spending time with you and the kids, obviously. But I'm an avid road cyclist. I try to ride for at least an hour or longer every day on my road bike. I love photography. I love snowboarding. I love surfing. Pretty much any excuse to get outside and get away from technology is always welcome. But I also love traveling, and I think that has been kind of a golden thread that's run through my life. It's a joy of experiencing different cultures, different food, different languages, meeting interesting people with different backgrounds, and I think that really does lend itself to this type of work.
Absolutely. And I think that's definitely something that you and I connected on very early. Loving travel, loving meeting people from different cultures, loving different languages. And I think you're totally right. We're in the perfect type of work to be able to make a difference in the lives of international citizens. I think that, you know, there's so much more that can be done. And I'm just really excited about our partnership and how this is going to take our law firm to the next level. And we're so excited to be here for you all and to help you in this journey. I know sometimes it can be really, really challenging, but now you don't have to do it by yourself, right? You have experts who actually understand this process, understand, how you can, do your best and how you can maximize your chances of success. And, and this is going to be a great year for us. And Travis, I don't know if there's anything else you want to share with everybody before
No,
we
other
sign
than to
off.
say, reach out to us. I'm looking forward to meeting you and understanding your circumstances and helping you through this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys, like this video, like this interview, like what we're doing, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Travis and I will be making videos on a regular basis about different issues in the visa process that will hopefully help you on your journey. You can also visit our website at www.zfvisa.com, and that's where you can figure out, you can book a session with either me or Travis and talk about the specific visa challenges that you're facing. And we really look forward to, bringing you more great content and also having consultations with you and seeing how we can be of service to you in your visa and immigration journey. So thanks
Absolutely.
again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for tuning in and see you next time.